An old man sits on the damp stone floor of a cave overlooking the Aegean Sea. Salt crusting in his beard, they think of it as a place of endless screaming, a permanent monument to human failure coexisting endlessly alongside heaven. If you have ever lain awake, staring at a dark bedroom ceiling, terrified for the soul of someone you love, you know the crushing gravity of verse 15. You have probably sat against the hard oak of a church pew, listening to a sermon that painted the afterlife as a terrifying binary of endless bliss or endless screaming. Feeling a cold sweat form on the back of your neck, you have likely been handed damp paper tracts on street corners that use the lake of fire as a blunt psychological weapon to force a quick decision. The modern church has largely conditioned you to read this passage through the lens of Dante's Inferno, forcing you to hold two deeply conflicting ideas in your mind at the exact same time. You are asked to believe in a God who is fundamentally defined by self-giving love, while simultaneously believing that this same God will use his infinite power to artificially sustain the biological consciousness of billions of people solely for the purpose of burning them alive forever. But if you bring the historical reality of the Gehenna incinerator back into your theology, that terrible cognitive dissonance finally begins to break apart. If God is the singular source of all life, all breath, and all existence in the cosmos, then a final, absolute separation from God cannot logically result in eternal life in a different location. To be severed from the source of existence is to cease to exist entirely. When a human being who has completely aligned themselves with the forces, and it does carry the ultimate, terrifying weight of divine judgment. But if you look closer at the cultural context of the first century, of destruction is finally given over to that choice. They are thrown into the same incinerator that consumed death and Hades. The fire does not preserve them in order to punish them. The fire consumes them. The second death is not a parallel eternity of endless suffering. It is the tragic, irreversible uncreation of a human soul. It is the painful but necessary sterilization of the universe. The moment when the Creator finally honors the devastating human demand to be left completely alone. He withdraws the gift of existence from those who absolutely refuse to live in harmony with the atmosphere of heaven. You do not have to spend your nights agonizing over a God who tortures his enemies forever, because the text is telling you that the fire is a mechanism of tragic deletion, not a mechanism of perpetual cruelty. The anxiety you carry about the end of the world is largely based on a cultural misunderstanding of what the fire is actually designed to do. But John does not end his apocalyptic vision with the smoke rising from the incinerator. To truly understand the universe that emerges on the other side of this cosmic deletion, you have to turn the page and look at the fourth and final time he writes this terrifying phrase on his parchment. A new heaven descends. A new earth forms. The sea is completely gone. The sky is perfectly clear. The holy city drops from the clouds. At the Jewish apocalyptic language John is breathing. At what actually happens in the text, every single time this phrase appears. It shines like raw jasper. It flashes like cut crystal. The massive gates are carved from solid pearl. The streets reflect light like transparent gold. You can hear the heavy, ancient silence break. God moves into the neighborhood. He reaches out a hand. He wipes a physical tear from a human cheek. He speaks into the light. Behold, I am making all things new. This is the absolute climax of human history. The bride is dressed. The dwelling place is settled. The long exile is over. But outside the towering walls, a boundary remains. The sharp smell of sulfur lingers in the extreme distance. John looks at the stunning, mathematical perfection of the city. Then, he looks at the final exclusion zone. He picks up his reed pen. He writes the phrase for the fourth and absolute final time. Revelation chapter 21, verse 8. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. This is the ultimate dividing line. The gates of the city stand wide open. They never shut by day. There is no night to close them. But not everything can walk through them. The coward cannot enter. The murderer cannot cross the threshold. The liar cannot walk the transparent streets. You start to see something the medieval reading completely misses. The second death is not a containment zone. It is an uncreation. If you bring death into a city with no grave, you infect the utopia. If you bring violence into a city of absolute peace, you shatter the sanctuary. If the liar is allowed inside, the truth of heaven fractures. The lake of fire stands as the cosmic immune system. It is not a torture chamber beneath the floorboards of heaven. It is the permanent quarantine outside the gates. It ensures that the trauma of the old world can never, ever colonize the new one. The second death is the firebreak that protects the eternal garden. It is the absolute guarantee that the tears God just wiped away will never be cried again. It is the violent end of violence itself. But this final boundary forces us to zoom out and look at the universe that remains when the smoke of that quarantine finally clears. When you step back from the apocalyptic imagery and look at the theological architecture of John's entire vision, a profound realization begins to take shape. For centuries, the Western Church has functionally taught a universe of eternal dualism. We have been conditioned to accept a cosmic stalemate, where heaven and hell exist parallel to one another forever, operating like two separate rooms in the eternal house. We imagine a reality where God reigns in the unapproachable light, but the groans of the damned vibrate continuously beneath the floorboards of the holy city. It is the final, irreversible deletion of that which destroys life. John is not trying to terrify you with a torture chamber, but a universe where evil exists eternally is a universe where evil is never truly defeated. If the lake of fire is an eternal, conscious torture chamber, then the sharp stench of burning sulfur will forever drift through the open pearl gates of the New Jerusalem. If the agonizing screams of the lost echo perpetually into the ears of the saved, then the promised peace of God is nothing more than a localized illusion, a walled garden surrounded by a permanent, deafening atrocity. In that paradigm, God would be forever managing a cosmic prison camp, never truly free of the rebellion that shattered Eden. The revelation given to John on Patmos does not offer us that kind of theological nightmare. The second death is not a permanent monument to human rebellion. It is the cosmic broom that sweeps the universe completely clean. The fire of Gehenna has one specific, historical function in the biblical narrative. It burns until there is absolutely nothing left to consume. And then it goes out. It reduces the refuse of the old world to white ash, sterilizing the ground so that something new and uncorrupted can grow in its place. When you read the absolute final pages of the biblical library, you do not see a bifurcated eternity. You see a reality where the Apostle Paul's promise in his letter to Corinth is finally, fully realized. He is trying to give you a promise about the absolute end of evil. He is diagnosing a cosmic infection and revealing God becomes all in all. Every rebel power has been dismantled. Every shadow has been eradicated. Every trace of the infection has been permanently uncreated. The universe is finally, undeniably whole. The silence of the morning is unbroken by the sound of weeping. The air is perfectly clear, smelling only of fresh rain and the healing leaves of the tree of life. The tragic necessity of the fire has accomplished its work, and the fire itself can finally rest. And when you trace this singular, terrifying phrase backward from this clean universe, all the way to its first appearance on a damp parchment in a dark cave, you realize exactly the scale of the promise John was handing to humanity. The terrified believers in Smyrna faced the Roman sword and discovered the fire could not touch their ultimate reality. The beheaded martyrs stepped out of the dirt and onto their thrones, and the grave realized it had absolutely no jurisdiction. The ancient Valley of Hinnom burned the city's refuse and became the exact vocabulary for the final cleansing of the cosmos. The ancient forces of death and Hades were dragged to the shoreline, and the destroyer was finally, violently destroyed. The human rebel, who entirely refused the light, met the flames and was tragically, irreversibly uncreated. The exact moment the universe is finally, permanently cured. We are a species entirely defined by the first death. The coward and the violent were left outside the solid pearl gates, and the sanctuary of the new earth was permanently secured. The incinerator burned until the cosmic infection was completely sterilized, and then the fire itself went to sleep. One ultimate boundary. One permanent cure. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the sight of that ancient enemy standing on the edge of the lake, death itself. Dragged to the execution block. Not a biological inevitability. A condemned prisoner. If you are in a season where the first death feels terrifyingly close, if you are staring at an empty chair at the dinner table, or waiting for a doctor to return with a heavy chart, or watching a body you love begin to fail, Revelation is a place to stand. The grave is not a permanent fixture of reality. It is a temporary infection with a scheduled expiration date. And may the God who will one day wipe the physical tears from your face, to give you the courage to look past the shadows of this broken age and see the breathtaking dawn of a universe swept completely clean. It takes our parents. It takes our children. It humbles kings and shatters empires. It is the inescapable horizon of every human life. But John is sitting in this cave, looking past that horizon. He is looking at a moment when death itself is put on trial. To see what he sees, we have to track this specific, terrifying phrase through the only book in the Bible that uses it. He is not writing a history. He is not recording a parable. He is staring into a tear in the fabric of reality. 4 appearances. 4 specific contexts. And the place to start is not at the end of the world. The place to start is in a letter to a small, frightened community on the coast of modern-day Turkey. A group of people who were actively watching their friends be executed, and who desperately needed to know what happens after you close your eyes for the last time. To understand the first time this phrase appears on the parchment, you have to travel back to the Roman province of Asia in the late 1st century. The setting is Smyrna. It is a wealthy, beautiful city on the water, famous for its loyalty to Rome and its magnificent temples. The smell of incense hangs heavy in the streets as citizens burn offerings to the emperor. But there is a small group of people who refuse to burn the incense. They refuse to say Caesar is Lord, and they are paying for it with their lives. To this small, terrified group of believers, the voice in John's vision speaks. It is recorded in Revelation chapter 2, verse 11. The voice says, "He who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death." This first mention is not a threat. It is a shield. The believers in Smyrna are facing physical execution, the first death, which is violent, bloody, and imminent, watching the end of the world bleed into the beginning of the next. The wind off the water is cold. The Roman authorities can confiscate their property, throw them to the wild beasts in the arena, or burn them at the stake. But the voice from the vision whispers a radical promise. The first death is temporary. It is a sleep. It is a transition. The empire can hurt their bodies, but they cannot touch their ultimate reality. In Jewish thought of the 1st century, particularly in the Aramaic translations of the Hebrew scriptures, known as the Targums, the term second death was already starting to form. It was used to describe those who die and do not rise to life in the age to come. It meant a death from which there is no resurrection, a permanent, final boundary. John is speaking to people who are staring into the literal flames of Roman execution. He is reframing their terror. The Romans can inflict the first death, but that is the maximum extent of their power. The second death is a category of reality that belongs to God alone. And for those who hold fast, that door is locked from the inside. But that brings us to a massive, unresolved question. If the second death is a boundary of finality, but the visions burning in his mind are terrifyingly bright. He holds a reed pen, and on the rough parchment resting on his knee, what actually happens to those who do cross over it? What does it look like when the cosmic timeline moves past the era of human empires and into the Great White Throne? The second appearance of the phrase takes us directly into that court. An angel plunges from the sky. He holds a great iron chain in his hand. He carries a heavy key. He seizes the ancient serpent. He binds him. He throws him down into a bottomless black pit. He slams the door. He seals it shut. The earth goes quiet. Thrones are dragged into the light. People step up to take their seats. John looks closely at who they are. They are the martyrs. They are the ones who were beheaded for their testimony. They are the very same people who were bleeding and terrified in Smyrna. They open their eyes. They breathe in the air. They stand up. They come to life. This is the moment John introduces the second occurrence of the phrase, Revelation chapter 20, verse 6. Blessed and holy is the one who shares in the first resurrection. Over such, the second death has no power. Look at the symmetry of the vision. It is a cosmic ledger. You die once. You rise once. The math is closed. The first resurrection is not a reward for good behavior. It is an absolute immunity. He writes two words in Greek, deuteros thanatos, the second death. He writes it once. Then again, for these people, the worst thing that could ever happen to them has already happened. The empire took their heads. The dirt took their bodies. The first death took all it could carry, but it was not enough to keep them in the ground. Now they reign. Now they rule. Now, the second death looks at them and finds nothing left to consume. It has no jurisdiction here. It has no teeth. It has no power. This is the bridge between the old world and the final judgment. It is a 1,000-year breath drawn by a weary creation. You can hear the clink of the heavy chains in the deep. You can feel the solid ground under the feet of the risen saints. You can see the light of the thrones pushing back the dark. But 1,000 years is just a pause. The lock on the abyss is going to break. The final rebellion is going to gather like sand on a windy seashore. The sky and the earth are going to flee away, in terror, from the face of the one sitting on the great white throne. The dead, great and small, are going to stand before God. And then, the lake of fire opens its mouth. This is where the phrase appears for the third time, 4 times in total, scattered across the final chapters of the final book of the biblical library. 4 times. That is it. And to understand what John is actually seeing when he looks into those flames, we have to travel away from the island of Patmos and walk out to the burning trash dump just outside the walls of ancient Jerusalem. Just south of the ancient limestone walls of Jerusalem sits a deep, narrow ravine. Today it is quiet, but in the first century, it was a place of perpetual smoke. To understand what John sees when the final judgment begins in Revelation 20, we have to look at the conceptual vocabulary built decades earlier by Jesus himself. When English Bibles describe Jesus warning people about hell, they are usually translating a very specific, historically grounded word. The word is the Greek Gehenna. It appears 12 times in the New Testament, and its etymology completely dismantles the popular imagery of demons with pitchforks. Gehenna is not a mythological realm in the afterlife. It is a Greek transliteration of the Hebrew Ge-Hinnom, the Valley of Hinnom. This was a literal geographic location, centuries before Jesus walked the earth. Apostate kings of Judah went down into this exact valley and sacrificed their children in the fire to the Canaanite god Molech. It was a place of unimaginable historic trauma. Because of this horrific history, the prophets cursed the valley. It is a phrase that has haunted the human imagination for 2,000 years. Most people read these 2 words, and immediately, and by the 1st century, it had been repurposed into the city's smoldering refuse dump. It was a place where garbage, animal carcasses, and the bodies of unburied criminals were thrown into fires that were kept burning day and night to prevent disease. When Jesus spoke in Mark chapter 9 about a place where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched, his audience did not think of a subterranean cavern. They smelled the burning sulfur from the valley outside their walls. They saw the literal incinerator of the city. That geographic reality changes everything about how we read John's vision on Patmos. Gehenna is not a torture chamber where God keeps evil alive forever. It is the cosmic incinerator. It is the final, irreversible destruction of the things that destroy life. And if realizing the historical reality behind these texts is stirring up questions you have never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper into the original context than you knew was possible. So John looks at the great white throne. He watches as the books are opened, and the lake of fire, the ultimate cosmic Gehenna, is revealed. This is where the phrase appears for the third time. Revelation, chapter 20, verse 14. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. Project medieval paintings onto them. They assume this phrase is just a poetic synonym for hell as an eternal conscious torture chamber. This is the second death, the lake of fire. But look closely at what is actually thrown into the flames first. It is a detail sitting right there in the text, and it completely shatters the medieval paradigm of eternal conscious torment. Look at the text again. Revelation chapter 20, verse 14. John does not see people being thrown in first. He does not see terrified human souls lined up on the edge of the abyss. He sees a concept. He sees an enemy. He sees death and Hades. The Greek word John writes on his parchment is thanatos. It appears 119 times in the New Testament. But in this specific moment, it is violently personified. It stands as a condemned prisoner. Thanatos is not just the biological cessation of a heartbeat. It is the cosmic force that has terrorized humanity since the gates of Eden closed. It is every graveyard. It is every battlefield. It is every oncology ward. Every empty chair at the dinner table. Every weeping mother in history. And John watches it in the blinding, unshadowed light of the great white throne. Two ancient figures are dragged to the shoreline of the lake. Death is pulled forward. Hades is dragged from the shadows. The grave is emptied out. The tomb is entirely dismantled. A basement of the universe where God locks away the broken things, the rebellious things, leaving them to burn in the dark forever. You can feel the blistering heat radiating from the surface of the fire. You can see the dark silhouette of the underworld shriveling, collapsing, and dissolving as it hits the flames. The air smells like ozone and absolute finality. The lake of fire is not a subterranean containment zone where God keeps evil alive forever. It is the execution block for death itself. This is the ultimate, stunning paradox of the phrase. The first death took everything from humanity. The second death takes everything from death. It consumes the consumer. It destroys the destroyer. It burns the very concept of the grave into white ash. Once Thanatos and Hades are thrown into the incinerator, the architecture of the universe is permanently altered. You cannot have a universe with a grave anymore. The cosmic disease has been eradicated. The infection has been sterilized. God is not torturing death for eternity. He is deleting it from existence. But the vision does not stop with the destruction of the grave, because verse 15 follows immediately, and it carries the terrifying weight that keeps so many awake in the dark. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. That single line has haunted the modern church, and it forces us to ask what actually happens to a human being who meets the same fire.